Hello, my name is Christina Åbo and I'm a writer, and these days I'm reading for you, the chapters from my book 19 Lonely Trees, one video per chapter, one chapter a day, and today we have reached chapter number 3 of my book 19 Lonely Trees. But before I start reading, I need to take a moment to send my deepest regards and thoughts to every single one of you out there who are suffering from injustice and inhumanity, violence and, injustice because of color, religion, sexual orientation, age, or anything else, gender. You all have my heart and thoughts. For a brief moment, though, let me take you into the fiction. Leave the world, go into the fiction, and let me read to you chapter 3 of my book, 19 Lonely Trees. That is all about love. Chapter number 3 is called The Beginning. You just wait and see. You just wait and see, Alina had said with the last word she ever used. And therefore, I now sat here, in the middle of a desert, staring on a very huge, lonely tree. The first of 19 trees Alina had sent me out to get their stories from. You may think it was silly of me to go. I myself thought it was silly. But I had given my word to Alina, and if you love someone very dearly, then you are ready to do anything for that person, even things that seem silly. But in all honesty, I never believed anything at all would happen. There would be nothing to see other than trees, obviously, but in no way anything to hear. I had come out here in the desert first to this exact tree because of the name of the tree. When I had told Alina of the lonely trees, I had begun with this tree because it is called Tree of Life. I thought it fitting very well in a story to begin by speaking of life. And now, when Alina was no longer with me, it made even more sense. The Tree of Life stands in the desert of Bahrain. It is more than 400 years old, and no one knows how it survives because it never rains. Some say the tree is protected by a god called Enki. It is the name of the god of water around here. But others say the Tree of Life does not need water, the reason being it stands exactly in the middle of what was once the Garden of Eden, there where all life began. I don't know what I believe. I do not know much about trees or gods, but I waited. Wait and see, Alina had said. The sun shone very warm down on the sand and me and the tree, standing spreading its branches with a bunch of green leaves. The air shivered in the heat, and it really was not too comfortable here when one was not used to be in a desert. I felt sad. The air shivered from heat over the tree. I do not know if I had fallen asleep there in the heat. Anyway, at first I was certain it was a dream vision I saw. A strange figure came sort of gliding out from the tree towards me. You're thinking of Lena? It was not a question, so I just nodded, rather stunned. My dream vision could speak. He continued. She thought of life, of living, and where life comes from. Yes. I looked at the figure who had now approached me closely. He was a bit blurred, a bit like a spirit, only clearer than I had imagined the spirit being. On the other hand, I had never met a spirit before. He wore a sort of cape changing in many colors, and also he was bold. Very much like Alina, I thought she too was always so filled with color, and she was bald too, in the last part of her life anyway. She thought of the whole thing about beginnings, and you think of endings. Again, it was not a question. The spirit looked at me. Only there are no such thing as endings. I really was not sure of that. Actually, I was right there in the middle of the desert of Bahrain, quite certain there were endings. Otherwise, I had not been sitting there. I thought, I don't know if perhaps I said it out loud or if the spirit could read my mind all the same. It answered me. Had you believed in endings, you would not be sitting here. Think about that. Stories never ends. He looked at me. I am Anansi. I am the spirit of all stories. He smiled at me. You know, everything has a story of its own. But listening to a story does not mean you automatically understand the story. We have now walked up close to the tree, and Nancy smiled gently. Remember, one listens with the heart, not the ears. Then it was as if he dissolved in the air. Only a vague glow remained around the tree itself now. I stood indecisively. Should I leave? Should I stay? I slowly sank down onto the sand in front of the tree and stared at it. A shivering went through the tree. Its flood of beautiful green leaves shivered, and it sounded like the humming from a million bees. Only for a brief moment. It was as if the tree sighed. You are seeking stories. I am the story about the beginning. I thought I was about to get a sunstroke from the heat. I should be stunned the tree spoke to me, but instead I just leaned back comfortably under the shadowing canopy and listened. There once was a king. He ruled a great empire. There was sun and sand enough for all. The empire was surrounded by an ocean filled with fish, so his people was never short of food. There were springs with water, not many, and it was difficult for his people to find water, but not impossible. But the king had a huge problem. There was absolutely not a thing in this desert empire to shelter from the burning sun during day and from the freezing cold during night. The people lived in dark tents and only came out in the brief hours around sunrise or the brief hours after sunset. The king thought long of the problem, and finally he sent for his 3 children. He told them, "You are the future and hopes of this empire. One of you shall lead the empire when I die. To figure out whom this will be, I have decided that you must go out into the world. From there you will bring back something that will give the much needed shelter from the sun for the people." The 3 princes nodded, packed their luggage for a long journey, and went into the world, each one of them. A long time passed, but one final day they all returned home. Each now stood in front of their father, the king, very secretive, holding their solution to the problem in their hands. "Let me see what you have brought me," said the king. And each prince came forward and opened their hands. In each of the outstretched hands was a tiny seed. The king shook his head. "You have all brought back the same to me, a little tiny seed. How can it in any way shelter my people from the burning sun?" The three princes said they would show their father what the seed could do, and left him. No one noticed an extra tiny little seed being dropped and thereafter being picked up by a servant girl. One prince hid with his seed in a cage and waited, but nothing happened, even if the seed was watered well. The second prince also hid in a cage, but there too nothing at all happened to the seed, even if it was ventilated well. The third prince decided he would make sure the seed got a portion of the sun it would have to learn to fight. But even though they all waited for many years, nothing happened. The servant girl had picked up the dropped seed and brought it back home to the dark tent she lived in together with her family. Only there were many people in the family, and the tent was filled and dark, so she had to settle for a spot just next to the door. It was never completely dark there, and it was windy all the time. Whenever the girl had a sip of water, she also made sure to give the seed some few drops of water too. As the years passed by, the seed began to sprout and grow. The girl had grown up and she had gotten married and had moved away from the tent, so there was no one to give it water any longer. But nevertheless, it had continued to grow. One day, the king was notified of the strange vision there in the desert where normally only sand and sun was. A tree was growing there. The king himself came to see what was going on, and he became speechless when he saw the magnificent tree. He told his princes who had come with him, "Look at this glorious tree. It provides shelter for people, but even more so, its fruits provide the most wonderful food. Its juices give the sweetest honey, and the branches are resting places for the most beautiful birds. This tree is truly a miracle. It provides life to all in my kingdom. This is the beginning of a new era. Tell me, which one of you brought me the tree?" The three children, now grown-ups, shook their heads. "None of us, Father. We do not know how this happened." A woman in the king's procession stood forward. "My lord king," she said, "this tree is grown from the womb of this land. It was fostered by 3 loving parents, the wind, the water, and the sun, and thus it grew strong." The king nodded. He looked closer at the woman. "I believe I have seen you before." "Yes, my lord king. I was once a servant at your court. I found the seed one of your children had lost. Without telling anyone, I picked up the seed because I thought it was so beautiful, and I brought it home with me. I thought it would be a shame for the seed to get lost. I was often about to fail and often about to give up because it took a lot of taking care of. But I kept on taking care of the tree, and it showed me its gratitude, standing so beautiful and strong here now." Again the king nodded and looked at the woman. "The thought you had when you saw the seed brought us to this day." The king looked around at the desert and his people. The very first thought, the courage to fail, and the will to keep on going. That is the recipe of all beginnings, of all life. The king put his hand on the beautiful tree. This tree shall be known far and wide as the tree of life. It must be standing here till eternity, and it will inspire all of my people to beautiful new beginnings and life. That night, I laid in my tent, finding myself smiling. I had not been smiling for many months. I thought of beginnings and of life. It was good thoughts. I laid in my sleeping bag in the tent, and Nancy was still illuminating the tree of life with the magical glow. I could see the silhouette of the tree through the tent wall. I thought I could feel Elena's hand in mine. It was as if I could hear Anansi's words. There are no endings. See you tomorrow.